Today, we are going to tell an impactful story of a near-death experience that completely changed the life of Solomon Wakefield, a Christian missionary who, after a serious accident, had frightening visions in hell and a shocking encounter with none other than Queen Elizabeth. Get ready for an intense spiritual journey. But before you start, leave a comment on which city you're watching, and if you're not already subscribed, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Hello, my name is Solomon Wakefield. I never thought I would be here telling this story, but life sometimes has surprises in store for us that completely change our course. For over 20 years, I have dedicated my life to being a Christian missionary. I traveled from city to city, preaching the Word of God, firmly believing that I was fulfilling my purpose on earth. I saw myself as a man of unshakable faith, a dedicated servant of the Lord. My routine was simple. I woke up early, said my prayers, and left for another day of missionary work. I visited homes, participated in services in different churches, and sometimes even organized evangelistic events in public squares. I believed I was doing everything right, following biblical teachings to the letter and bringing the message of salvation to everyone I met. But everything changed the day I was in a car accident. It was an event that transformed not only my life, but my entire perception of the spiritual world. What I experienced while I was on the verge of death revealed things to me that I never imagined were possible. It is about this experience that I want to share with you today. I know that what I'm about to tell you may seem hard to believe. Myself, if someone had told me something like that before the accident, I probably would have doubted it. But I can guarantee that every detail I'm going to report is true, at least in my experience. I'm not here to convince anyone or to create some kind of movement. I'm just an ordinary man who has been through something extraordinary and feels the need to share. I ask that you listen to my story with an open mind. I'm not asking you to blindly believe everything I'm going to say, but to reflect on the implications of what I experienced. My experience completely changed my outlook on life, death, and what exists beyond our physical world. And it is possible that by listening to my story, you may also rethink some of your beliefs and perceptions. So let's start from the beginning. I'll tell you about the day of the accident and what happened afterwards. Get ready for a journey that challenges everything we think we know about reality. It was an afternoon like any other. I was driving down the road, leaving a small town in the French countryside, on my way to another town where I was going to preach. The sky was clear, the sun was shining, and I felt at peace. The car radio played praise music, and I hummed softly, thanking God for another day of work in His work. I remember thinking about the message I was going to share at the service that night. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't realize I was approaching a sharp bend. When I realized it, it was already too late. The car skidded, and I felt as if time had slowed down. I saw the world spin around me as the vehicle rolled over several times. The impact was brutal. I felt a sharp pain shoot through my entire body, and then nothing. Silence took over everything. For a moment I thought I was dead. But then, something strange happened. It was as if I were floating, watching the accident scene from above. I saw my body trapped in the car's hardware, blood dripping from a cut on my forehead. People began to approach, shouting for help. I wanted to tell them that I was okay, that I was up there, but no one could hear or see me. It was at that moment that I realized I was having an out-of-body experience. It was as if my consciousness had separated from my physical body. Soon ambulances and paramedics arrived. I saw them take me out of the car and begin emergency procedures. I heard one of them say, "Hi, he's in critical condition. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." I wanted to scream, say that I was there, that I could hear everything, but it was impossible. During the ride to the hospital, I floated above the ambulance, watching everything. The paramedics struggled to keep my vital signs stable. I could feel the urgency in their voices, the fear in their eyes. That's when I realized the gravity of the situation. I was fighting for my life. Arriving at the hospital, I was taken straight to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, hooking me up to machines, administering medications. I heard medical terms that I didn't understand, but I knew my situation was critical. It was at that moment that something even stranger began to happen. The environment around me began to change. The walls of the hospital seemed to dissolve, and I found myself in a place that was neither here nor there. It was like being suspended between two worlds, the physical and the spiritual. As my body lay unconscious on the hospital bed, my consciousness seemed to wander into an undefined space. It was like being in a dream, but much more vivid and real. I could see the hospital room, the doctors working tirelessly to keep me alive, but at the same time, I noticed another reality overlapping this one. It was then that I noticed I was not alone in that space between worlds. There were other presences around me, some comforting, some terrifying. I saw luminous figures that seemed to radiate peace and love. Were they angels? But there were also dark shadows that moved menacingly, emanating a sense of fear and despair. Suddenly I realized I could see beyond the hospital walls. It was as if the entire building had become transparent. I saw other patients in their beds, some surrounded by those same luminous figures, others haunted by shadows. I realized that I was witnessing a spiritual battle that is normally invisible to our eyes. I watched as some of these dark creatures, which I can only describe as demons, approached people who appeared to be on the verge of death. They carried chains and laughed grotesquely as if they were delighting in human suffering. It was a sight that filled me with terror. But what scared me most was a figure that was slowly approaching. It was an imposing presence, shrouded in shadows thicker than the others. Somehow, I knew, this was Death himself. She moved through the hospital, stopping briefly next to some beds. Whenever I did this, I saw the patient's soul detach from the body. I wanted to scream, warn those people, do something to stop what was happening. But it was as if I were a mere spectator, unable to interfere with what I saw. The helplessness I felt at that moment was overwhelming. As I watched this surreal scene, I noticed that the hospital floor seemed to open up in some places, revealing black holes that sucked in the souls of those who passed away. It was as if hell itself was opening its doors right there, in the middle of that hospital. Time seemed to not exist in this state. I can't tell you how long I stayed there witnessing this invisible spiritual war. It could have been minutes, hours, or even days. All I know is that every moment felt like an eternity. It was in this moment of deep despair and confusion that something incredible happened. An intense light, brighter than anything he had ever seen, burst into the room. It was so strong that even the densest shadows seemed to retreat. And from that light, a majestic figure emerged, an angel. His presence was both comforting and intimidating. He radiated an authority that made all other creatures, good and bad, turn away. For a moment, I thought he had come to save me, to take me back to my body, or maybe to a better place. But when the angel spoke, I realized I was mistaken. He didn't come to comfort me, he came to judge me. The angel's voice was like thunder, reverberating not just around me, but within me. "Solomon Wakefield," he said, and the sound of my name in his voice made me shiver. "You made promises to God that you didn't keep." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to argue, to say that I had dedicated my life to serving God, that I had traveled to so many places preaching His word. But before I could form any coherent thoughts, my mind was flooded with memories. I saw times when I felt God's call to preach in difficult places, in poor or dangerous communities, but I chose to go to more comfortable cities. I remembered times when I ignored the inner voice that asked me to help someone in need because I was in a hurry or tired. The angel continued, "You ignored the warnings of the prophets and servants I sent to guide you." And again, the memories came. I saw the faces of people who had crossed my path, people I considered fanatics or extremists in their faith. Now I realized that they were messengers sent by God to correct me, and I had despised them. Every flaw, every deviation I've made over the years has been exposed. It was as if my entire life was being played out before my eyes. But now I could clearly see the spiritual consequences of every choice I made. The weight of the truth was crushing. I wanted to argue, to say that I had done the best I could, that my faith was sincere. But in the face of that divine presence, all my justifications seemed empty. For the first time, I saw myself as I really was, not the faithful servant I believed myself to be, but a man full of flaws and unfulfilled commitments. "The spiritual debts that you thought were paid still haunt you," said the angel. And I understood that every wasted opportunity, every ignored calling, had created a spiritual debt. I had preached about repentance and forgiveness, but now I realized that I hadn't really understood the weight of those words. The angel's judgment was not cruel or vindictive. It was the pure truth, exposed in a way I couldn't deny or ignore. It was painful, yes, but also liberating. For the first time, I was seeing myself and my life without self-deception or justifications. When I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the angel reached out his hand to me. "Come," he said. "There is more you need to see." I hesitated for a moment, fearing what else might be revealed, but something inside me knew I had no choice. This journey, as difficult as it was necessary. With a mix of fear and curiosity, I grabbed the angel's hand. The instant I did, I felt a powerful energy flow through me. It was as if every cell of my being was being purified and strengthened at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the scenery around us changed. We were no longer in the hospital. What I saw next would forever change my understanding of the spiritual world and the invisible battle that rages around us every day. In an instant, we were transported out of the hospital. What I saw around me took my breath away. The city that stretched out before my eyes seemed normal at first glance, with people walking the streets, cars passing by, everyday life taking its course. But there was a layer of reality superimposed on this that made me question everything I believed I knew about the world. The air was literally filled with spirit creatures. Demons of all shapes and sizes hovered over buildings, moved among people, whispered in their ears. Some were small and cunning, others huge and menacing. I saw how they manipulated people's actions in ways I could never have imagined. "This is the spiritual warfare you have neglected," said the angel at my side. His words hit me like a punch in the gut. I had preached about spiritual warfare for years, but now I realized that I hadn't really understood the magnitude of what was happening. I watched as a demon whispered in a businessman's ear, urging him to greed. I saw another provoking an argument between a couple, fueling their anger. On a street corner, a group of demons surrounded a young man, tempting him with vice and destruction. But it wasn't just evil forces I saw. Luminous angels were also present, fighting demons, protecting those who sought God. I saw how they strengthened those who resisted temptation, how they comforted the afflicted and guided the lost. The angel took me to different places in the city. We passed schools, where I saw demons trying to influence young minds with destructive ideas. We visited government offices, where dark creatures whispered selfish and corrupt advice into the ears of leaders. In each place, the battle was intense. It was a constant war for control of human souls, a fight that took place every second, in every decision people made. What shocked me most was seeing how this spiritual battle directly affected the physical world. Accidents that seemed random, seemingly chance encounters, decisions made in the heat of the moment, all of these had a spiritual dimension that I had never realized before. "You were preaching," said the angel, "but you were not seeing the real battlefield." His words hit me deeply. I had spent years talking about faith and spirituality, but now I realized I had only scratched the surface of reality. As we watched, I saw people I recognized as fervent Christians. Some were surrounded by a protective light, bravely resisting the demon's attacks. Others, to my surprise and disappointment, seemed almost as vulnerable as non-believers to evil influences. "Why do some seem more protected than others?" I asked the angel. "The strength of faith is not just in words or appearances," he replied. "It lies in the sincerity of the heart and obedience to divine truths." This answer made me reflect on my own life and ministry. How many times had I judged others, faith based only on what I could see? How many times had I neglected my own spiritual life, trusting more in my preaching skills than in my true connection with God? The angel then guided me away from the hustle and bustle of the city. "There's more you need to see," he said, his voice deep and serious. "Now, let's take a closer look at those who should be on the front lines of this battle." With those words, I felt a change in the environment around us. We were moving towards something that I intuited would be even more revealing and possibly disturbing than what I had already seen. The angel took me to a series of churches. At first glance, they appeared normal, well-kept buildings, with people coming and going, apparently engaged in religious activities. But when I looked closer, with the spiritual vision I was granted, I was horrified by what I saw. In the first church we visited, the angel pointed to a well-dressed man greeting people at the entrance. "This is a deacon of this congregation," said the angel. I looked more closely and saw a dark aura around him. "He lives a double life," the angel continued. "In the eyes of the congregation, he is a respected leader. But secretly, he indulges in sinful practices, including fornication." I was shocked. How could someone in a leadership position live so hypocritically? But what I saw next disturbed me even more. Young people in the congregation, whom I expected to see full of fervor and dedication, were surrounded by worldly influences. Their spiritual auras were tarnished, indicating that they followed practices that went against the teachings of Christ. "They are unaware of their own corruption," explained the angel. "They believe they are living a Christian life, but their hearts are far from God." We moved to another church, larger and more imposing than the first. The pastor was at the pulpit, preaching eloquently. His voice resonated throughout the auditorium, and people seemed captivated by his words. But when I looked with spiritual eyes, I saw something terrible. The angel spoke, his voice thick with sadness. "This a dark secret. They pornographic films and teach their abominable practices as a way to spice up their church members and marriage." I was horrified. How could someone in such a response distort something so sacred? "They distort what is sacred for carnal ends," continued the angel. Many in the congregation follow their example, believing they are merely modernizing their faith. The third church we visited seemed the most prosperous of all. The building was impressive, and there were luxurious cars in the parking lot. But what I saw inside sickened me. "Here," said the angel, "leadership positions are sold to the highest bidder." I saw how those who contributed the most financially were treated with special deference, occupying the most prominent places. On the other hand, the poorest members were marginalized, relegated to the corners of the church. "They have turned the house of God into a marketplace," said the angel, echoing Jesus' words when he drove the money changers out of the temple. "Faith here is measured by the size of the offering, not by the sincerity of the heart." As we watched, I saw how demons moved freely within these churches, whispering in the ears of the leaders, inciting pride, greed, and lust. It was as if these congregations, which were supposed to be beacons of light, had become portals into darkness. "How is this possible?" I asked, feeling devastated. As have these churches, which should be on the front lines of the spiritual battle, become so corrupt? The angel looked at me with an expression of deep sadness. "Many started out with good intentions," he said. "But little by little, they gave in to the temptations of the world. Small commitments led to larger ones, until the line between the sacred and the profane became blurred." Reflecting on what I saw, I realized how much damage these corrupted churches were causing. Not only were they failing to protect their members, they were actively leading them astray. It was a betrayal of the trust people placed in their spiritual leaders. The angel then turned to me, his eyes piercing my soul. "What about you, Solomon? How many times have you turned a blind eye to corruption, afraid of losing your position or popularity? How many times have you preached half-truths to please your listeners rather than challenging them with God's full truth?" His words hit me like lightning. I wanted to protest, to defend myself, but I knew he was right. How many times had I seen signs of trouble and chosen to ignore them? How many times had I softened my message so as not to offend? "The responsibility of a spiritual leader is immense," continued the angel. Every soul in your care is precious in the eyes of God. The corruption you saw here did not happen overnight. It was the result of many small concessions, many moments when the truth was silenced in the name of expediency. I felt the weight of these words in my heart. I knew that if I survived this experience, I would no longer be able to continue as before. My ministry, my own life, would need a profound transformation. The angel then said, "There is more to see. What you have witnessed thus far is only the surface. Prepare yourself, for what comes next will reveal the depths of spiritual corruption." With those words, I felt a change in the environment around us. An intense cold enveloped me, and I had the feeling that we were about to plunge into something even darker and more disturbing. Suddenly, the scenery around us changed drastically. The temperature rose unbearably, and a smell of sulfur invaded my nostrils. We were in a place that could only be described as hell itself. Flames danced around us, and screams of agony echoed everywhere. "This," said the angel, "is the fate of those who reject the truth and choose the path of corruption." As we walked through this terrible place, I saw souls being tortured in ways that made me want to look away. But the angel insisted that I watch. "You must see the ultimate consequence of sin and rebellion against God," he said. It was then that I saw something that left me astonished. In the midst of a cave of suffering and pain, I recognized a familiar face. It was Queen Elizabeth. I was shocked. How could such a revered figure be in a place like this? "Many are the secrets of the powerful," said the angel, noticing my confusion. Like Queen Elizabeth made a secret pact with beings not of this world to maintain her power and influence. He explained to me that these beings, which we could call extraterrestrials, had an agenda of global manipulation. The Queen, in her quest for power, had allied herself with them, becoming part of a scheme aimed at controlling humanity. "She hid the truth from the world," continued the angel. "He collaborated with evil forces that sought to subjugate humanity. Now his soul suffers the consequences of his choices." I watched the figure that was once one of the most powerful in the world, now reduced to a state of eternal torment. It was a vision that challenged everything I believed I knew about the world and its leaders. But the horror didn't stop there. As we walked forward, I saw faces I recognized as famous pastors, religious leaders I admired and whose books I had read. "These," said the angel, pointing to a particularly tormented group, "have made pacts with Satan to open churches and deceive their congregations." I was appalled. How was it possible that people I saw as examples of faith could have fallen so low? "They used their positions to obtain power, money, and fame," the angel explained. "They sold the truth for earthly gain, leading many astray." I saw others who, although they had not made explicit pacts with evil, were being punished for their greed and hypocrisy. Pastors who preached prosperity while living in luxury at the expense of their poor followers. Leaders who used faith as a means of control and manipulation. "The responsibility of a spiritual leader is immense," said the angel. "Yea, those who use God's name to deceive and exploit face harsher judgment." As I watched these souls in torment, I couldn't help but think about my own life and ministry. How many times had I been tempted by the desire for recognition and wealth? How many times had I compromised the truth to please my audience? The angel, sensing my thoughts, said, "This vision is not just to judge others, Solomon. It is a warning and a chance for reflection for you. Every choice we make has eternal consequences." I felt the weight of these words in my soul. I knew that if I survived this experience, my life and ministry would have to change radically. I could no longer close my eyes to corruption, nor give in to the temptations of the world. "There is more to see," said the angel. "What you have witnessed thus far is just the beginning. Prepare yourself, for what comes next will reveal the depths of spiritual deception that permeates the world." With a mix of fear and determination, I prepared myself for the next stage of this eye-opening journey. I knew that whatever came next would forever change my understanding of the spiritual world and the role I should play in it. Our next destination was an imposing church with a large congregation. At first glance, It seemed like a place of genuine worship. The people sang fervently and the pastor preached eloquently. But the angel instructed me to look beyond appearances. "Watch closely," he said. "What you see is not what it seems." Concentrating, I began to notice something disturbing. The pastor, who moments before seemed filled with the Holy Spirit, now emanated a dark aura. His once loving eyes now gleamed with predatory interest. "This man," the angel explained, "is a Satanist disguised as a pastor. He has a deep knowledge of the Bible, but he uses it to manipulate and deceive." I was shocked. How could anyone use the Word of God in such a perverse way? I looked more closely and saw how he subtly distorted the Scriptures, inserting lies among partial truths. "Many in this congregation are spiritually blind," the angel continued. "They follow this false prophet without question, believing they are on the right path to salvation." I watched as the church members lapped up the pastor's every word, their faces lit up with misdirected devotion. It was as if they were under a spell, unable to discern the truth from the lie. The angel led me through the aisles of the church, showing me other forms of deception. I saw cell leaders who used mind control techniques to keep their members submissive. I have witnessed spiritual counselors who were actually channeling demonic entities. "These false ministers," said the angel, "are masters in the art of deception. They know the Scriptures better than many genuine Christians, but they use this knowledge for their own wicked ends." I observed how they mixed biblical truths with worldly philosophies and occult practices. The result was a toxic doctrine that imprisoned people's souls, moving them away from God's true path. "But why does God allow this?" I asked, feeling distressed by what I saw. The angel looked at me seriously. "Free will is a precious gift," replied the angel. "God allows everyone to choose their path. These false ministers have chosen deception, and those who follow them have chosen not to diligently seek the truth." As I pondered this, the angel guided me to another part of the church. There, I saw something that left me even more disturbed. A group of leaders were gathered in a room, discussing strategies to expand their influence. "These," said the angel, "are the architects of deception. They deliberately plan how to mix truth with lies to create doctrines that appear biblical, but that actually turn people away from God." I watched in horror as they analyzed human weaknesses, developing messages that appealed to selfishness, greed, and the desire for power. They talked about using music, the media, and even charity as tools of manipulation. Many of these leaders started out with good intentions, the angel explained, but little by little, they were seduced by power and fame. Now they are instruments in the hands of the enemy. As I watched, I couldn't help but think about my own ministry. How many times had I been tempted to soften the message to please my audience? How many times had I ignored the voice of the Holy Spirit for fear of losing followers or offerings? The angel, sensing my thoughts, said, "This is an opportunity for you, Solomon. See how easy it is to stray from the path of truth. Every compromise, every little lie, can lead to a path of destruction." I felt the weight of this truth in my soul. I knew that if I survived this experience, my ministry would have to change radically. There could no longer be room for half-truths or compromises with the world. "There is more to see," said the angel. "Spiritual deception takes many forms, and you need to be aware of them all." With a mix of fear and determination, I prepared myself for the next stage of this eye-opening journey. I knew that whatever came next would forever change my understanding of the spiritual world and the responsibility I had as a leader. The angel led me to a large auditorium where a musical performance was in progress. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary Christian concert, with people singing and dancing to seemingly uplifting music. But when the angel instructed me to look deeper, what I saw horrified me. "Watch closely," he said. "See how the rhythms of hell are being introduced into churches." Concentrating, I began to notice something disturbing about the music. Behind the cheerful melodies and seemingly pious lyrics, there was a dark, almost hypnotic rhythm. It was as if each beat was aligned with the pulses of hell I had previously witnessed. "These rhythms," explained the angel, like rock, rap, and samba, have their origins in the spiritual underworld. They are being used to corrupt praises and open the doors to demonic influences. I watched how the crowd reacted to the music. Many seemed to be in a kind of trance, their bodies moving almost involuntarily. I saw dark spiritual entities moving among people, feeding on the energy generated by the music. Most of these people have no idea how much danger they are in, said the angel. They think they are just enjoying modern music in church, without realizing they are opening their souls to evil influences. As I watched, I saw how some of the musicians on stage had particularly dark auras. The angel explained that they had made pacts with demonic entities in exchange for talent and fame. They use their gift to seduce souls, said the angel. Their songs are like bait, luring people away from true worship. Then the angel took me backstage, where I saw something that shocked me even more. Pastors and worship leaders were discussing contracts and performance fees. Notice how faith has become a business, said the angel sadly. I saw famous pastors charging exorbitant sums to preach in other churches, gospel musicians negotiating million-dollar contracts with record companies, worship leaders discussing marketing strategies as if they were selling any product. These, said the angel, pointing to a particularly lively group, are especially hated in hell. They use the name of God to enrich themselves, turning faith into a commodity. I watched as they planned events, created merchandise, and developed strategies to grow their personal brands. It was as if the spread of the gospel had become secondary to the growth of their personal empires. Many started out with good intentions, the angel explained, but little by little, they were seduced by fame and money. Now they are more businessmen than servants of God. As I watched this scene, I couldn't help but think about my own ministry. How many times had I been tempted to measure success by the size of the congregation or the value of the offerings? How many times had I considered softening my message to attract more followers? The angel, sensing my thoughts, said, "This is a warning to you, Solomon. See how easy it is to stray from the true purpose of ministry. Every commitment to the world, every decision based on personal gain rather than service to God, can lead to a path of destruction." I felt the weight of this truth in my soul. I knew that if I survived this experience, my approach to ministry would have to change radically. There could no longer be room for the commercialization of faith or for compromises with the values of the world. "There is one last thing you need to see," said the angel. "Prepare yourself, for what comes next will reveal to you the ultimate purpose of this journey." With a mix of apprehension and determination, I prepared myself for what would be the conclusion of this revealing experience. I knew that whatever came next would forever change my understanding of my role as a servant of God. Suddenly, I felt a powerful force pulling me back. Visions of hell, corrupted churches, and the commercialization of faith began to dissipate. I was returning to my body, lying in that hospital bed. I opened my eyes, blinking against the bright light of the room. The doctors and nurses around me looked surprised and relieved. I heard someone say, "It's a miracle, he's back." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore. A nurse kindly offered me some water. As I drank, memories of my experience flooded my mind. Everything seemed so vivid, so real. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I reflected deeply on everything I had seen and learned. The reality of spiritual warfare, the corruption in the churches, the false ministers, the commercialization of faith, all of this weighed heavily on my heart. My recovery was surprisingly quick, almost miraculous, as the doctors never tired of commenting. But I knew that true healing had to happen in my soul. When I was finally discharged, I knew I could not continue my ministry as before. The first thing I did was gather my team and share with them what I had experienced. Some were skeptical, others scared, but everyone noticed the profound change that had occurred in me. "Starting today," he told them, "our ministry will change radically. We will no longer seek numbers or contributions. Our focus will be solely on the truth of the gospel, no matter the cost." In the months that followed, I implemented significant changes. We abandoned programs that were more entertainment than spiritual edification. We stopped charging for events or materials. I began preaching more challenging messages, exposing the enemy's tactics and calling people to true repentance. As expected, many left the church. Our numbers dwindled, our finances became tight, but those who stayed experienced genuine revival. I saw lives being truly transformed, people freeing themselves from addictions and sinful patterns that had imprisoned them for years. I began traveling again, but this time not to preach at large conferences. I went to small churches, underserved communities, places that I would have ignored before. I shared my experience and warned about the dangers of spiritual deception. Not everyone received my message well. I was accused of being a fanatic, of having lost my mind due to the accident. Some religious leaders labeled me a heretic, but I knew I could no longer remain silent. As the years passed, I saw other leaders being touched by the same truth. A reform movement began to emerge, with churches abandoning worldly practices and returning to the simplicity and purity of the gospel. Today, looking back, I see how that near-death experience was actually a new birth for me. She opened my eyes to realities that I, like many others, had ignored for a long time. I know my journey is far from over. The spiritual battle continues, more intense than ever. But now, equipped with the truth revealed to me, I am determined to remain faithful to the end. For those who are reading or listening to my story, I leave an appeal. Don't be fooled by appearances. Seek the truth with all your heart. Be vigilant, for the enemy is cunning and deception often comes disguised as light. Always remember, true faith is not in empty rituals, exciting music, or eloquent preaching. It is in the sincere search for God, in obedience to His word, and in genuine love for others. May God give us discernment in these difficult times, and may we all remain faithful until the end.